Hello, friends. Welcome back to another Adobe Live. I hope that you are doing well. My name is Idar Ekpo, and I am going to be your host for the day. I am joining y'all from Phoenix, Arizona. I would love to see where y'all are joining us from. So whether you are on YouTube or Behance, go ahead and drop in the chat where you're joining us from. And today we are joined by lovely Amina El Kabbany. Amina, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so good. So happy to be here. It's really exciting to be back.
Oh, love it. Love it. Really excited for what we have planned for the day. But real quickly, always wanted to say thank you. Thank you all so much for joining us on Adobe Live. And just make sure that you join the Adobe Live community, okay? Whether that means over on YouTube Lamb, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure that you follow us at Adobe Live on Instagram for the latest streams, updates, and so much more. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you have planned for us, etc. Really excited to hear about it.
Yes, thank you, Yudara. So I'm Amina. I am a photographer based here in Los Angeles. I just opened a photo studio in downtown LA as well. So come say hi, reach out to me later about it. And I primarily focus on portraiture. I focus on branding photography, lots of really fun, like lifestyle shoots, cinematic energy, very colorful. So today we're going to really dive into some of that and how I get the ideas in my head onto the actual edits and really translate that vision in many different lighting settings as well. So we're going to jump into a lot of different edits.
Oh, beautiful. I'm so excited. Wade, thank you so much for dropping Amina's website. Make sure y'all check out her website as well as her Instagram. And Amina, where you said you're joining us from LA, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Oh, lovely. So I'm from Phoenix, LA, not too far from you. I think we're on the same time zone right now, which is actually kind of nice. Awesome. So let's go ahead and get into your work a little bit. I love how vibrant some of your work is, especially colors. I'm a huge fan of color in my work. So that is something that is always something that I notice first off the bat.
Yeah, me too. Like color, I just have such an affinity for it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just really important in the storytelling of my work, I think. It's really like
Yes.
to tell a story, you have to really allow people to feel it. And I think
Mm,
tonality really matters there.
mm. Oh, I love that. You have to allow people to feel it. Oh, I love that. I'm
Hmm.
gonna write that in my notes. I'm gonna quote you in my notes, girl. So
Yes.
what do we have planned for the day?
So today we've got a mix of different images from over the years. I curated some down for you from a few different international trips, as well as just in studio, getting those test shots in. There's even a book cover in here.
Oh
So we're going to show
wow.
you how we edited this book cover. And yeah, lots of different lighting environments as well. So we're going to go through if you're outside with a backdrop or if you're outside with like really harsh light, how do you even it out? How do you bring it to life? And how do you
Mm-hmm.
especially infuse your own unique voice and vision into these images to make sure
Yeah.
that whenever people see them, they know it was you who shot them and know it was you who edited them.
Oh, love it. So excited. If y'all have any questions throughout the live, be sure to drop them in the chat, whether again you're on YouTube or Behance. Drop your questions and I'll make sure that we ask them throughout the whole chat. Awesome. Let's go ahead and get started. Take it
Amazing.
away.
All right. So we're going to get started with some very soft images we shot pretty much like, I think it was like the crack of dawn or something in Panama. My friend Brandy and I went
Oh,
on a trip and we decided to shoot some photos. So where I start when I open any image in Lightroom, right? I just like to scoot through, like scroll through all of these different presets just to give myself an idea of where I want to take the image. And
mm,
the feeling usually jumps out to me when I see it. Sometimes it's just like you want to get a feeling for what's already there and what you want to bring out of it.
yeah.
So something like this that's very textured, there's a lot of different directions we could go. And I'm going to go ahead and edit it a few different ways for you just to show you how powerful Lightroom is and how many different ways you can tell this visual story. So as I'm scrolling through, I'm just kind of getting a feel for what direction I could possibly go in. And I'm going to maybe land somewhere to actually just kick us off. So I kind of like how these diffused colors are feeling here. I'm going to start with
Mm,
that one. And I just like to go ahead to this right module here and just play with the levels to see how far I could push it. And so it looks like the lighting was actually pretty even in this photo, so I'm going to kind of leave that alone. But if I want to see like less of the shadows, I would bring the blacks up here and the shadow and maybe bring the white down. And that's kind of making it too flat. So, you know what? I don't really love that edit anymore. I'm going to go up and actually, I'm going to go ahead and reset it. And so, luckily, Lightroom is non-destructive and you can always
Mhm.
reset an image. And if you want to go back to somewhere, if you like really loved it, you can actually go to the history in this left side module here. So I will always have those edits if I want to revisit them. But right now I'm like, it's not my vibe.
I feel that.
So, it's just like that's what I love about Lightroom is because sometimes I'm very indecisive and you don't know until you
Mhm.
know sometimes.
Oh, I'm the exact same way. I'm very indecisive, but that's the freedom in editing, and it's really important to give yourself that space and grace, essentially, to be free and edit whatever way you're feeling. If you're not feeling something anymore, just switch it up, change it, hit that reset button.
Exactly, exactly. It's so cool how many opportunities we have to make different decisions, especially with, digital technology.
Absolutely.
So shout out to Lightroom. And just in case you are just now tuning in, this is Lightroom Classic. I like the desktop version, has a lot of like really amazing capabilities. So I usually just scroll down to the noise reduction to give it myself a softer feeling, by the way. And I leave the sharpening up so that way it's like clear, crisp, but not too noisy, not too grainy.
Mm,
So right now it's feeling like a sunset kind of vibe. And honestly, I'm super into that. So we're just going to
yes.
keep going in that direction. And I want to see how warm I can bring it without making it feel too unnatural.
Mm,
So I'm going to just go ahead and push the temperature. It's feeling that looks like just like golden hour. And if I wanted
mm.
it to really feel like golden hour, I would maybe bring the exposure down a bit more. Now maybe I can bring up these shadows, lift them, and all of a sudden she looks like a Renaissance painting.
Oh, yes.
So we love these colors. The next thing I would do typically is I would scroll all the way down to our calibration. And this is going to calibrate from the color codes that were in your camera. And so you can actually, if I were you, I would stay within the first few tick marks to keep it pretty natural. But I like to just see what tones are available to me there. If I want it to be a little bit more pink, more warm, orangey, somewhere in between, but definitely more on the orange vibe. And if I think it's too saturated, I'm just going to go ahead and hit it down just a few times in the saturation.
Oh,
Now the
that's
greens, I feel like they could be a little bit more yellowy. Mm. And honestly, I treat this process like my own personal like art alchemy therapy
mm.
session. It's so meditative.
Oh, I love that. Oh, the way you're describing things is really doing something to me. I really love that. Like it's really a sense of therapy to really just it's really soothing, it's relaxing. So I love that. We do have one quick question that I want to ask you.
Yes.
So Pixie Poo asks, what inspires the tone for a photo for you?
That's a great question. So for me, when I am inspired by some tones in an image, it really starts with the environment itself and what I'm seeing in that moment. And so
Mm,
I feel like you can never really capture what you see in real life straight out of camera. It's very rare for me. And I have
mm-hmm.
had situations like that, but I do still have that image in my mind when I shoot
Yeah.
that photo. And so when I think about this memory of her sitting with her eyes closed and the shadows from the flowers covering her face and her body, I think of the actual warmth of the light and the actual tone, the range of tones that I saw in the leaves and how the light hit the pink flowers. And pretty much I try to do my best to emulate the feeling that I got from witnessing that moment. That's
Oh,
how I
wow.
approach it. But sometimes it'll also be like based on different creative direction. Like maybe I made a mood board beforehand and I'm really trying to bring out the tonality that
Yeah.
I curated in the mood board and then bring it into my editing style. I
Oh,
hope
that's
that
beautiful.
answered the
I, I
question.
I think it did. Pixie, let us know if you need anything else, but that was a great answer. Thank you, Amina.
Of course. And so now I'm over here in this hue, saturation, and luminance module here on the right. And I really like this as well because I think that it's really helpful with editing skin tones, especially like when you want to see more highlight pop without blowing the subject out. And so for skin, I would usually just like toggle this luminance bar here, and I would bring up the oranges and the yellows just to make her pop. And already that's feeling a lot more distinct, right?
Yeah.
So we just kind of, I treat it like a painting as well. I actually have a painting background. And so when I
Oh,
think of
wow.
light play and shadow and contrast, I'm kind of through the lens of a painter.
Yeah. What made you transition from the space of being a painter to photography? And then do you still paint now?
I paint every now and again, but honestly, not enough. Like I really
Mm,
miss it. And yeah, when I transitioned into photography, it was more so that I could take reference photos for my paintings. But then it became
mm.
its own journey and kind of consumed my whole life, for a lack of better word. So here I am, like 10 years later, still loving it, but I
Oh,
definitely miss painting.
oh, that's beautiful.
So we're gonna go ahead. I really like where we're at right now, but I feel like we could show a little bit more love to the foliage that is framing her here. And so the way I love to do this is I like to use the masking tools here that have changed over the years, by the way, which is so
Mm-hmm.
cool. They've gotten a lot more succinct, you know?
Yes.
But the linear gradient is what I will choose to use right now. And I'm really just going to drag it over to highlight this right side here and kind of buffer into her skin there. And what that does is that highlights this area in a very soft way that I can actually
Mm.
edit this side specifically and leave the rest of the image alone. And so now I'm just kind of trying to do my best to bring out that same tonality within the leaves. And I love to push the shadows as much as I
Mm-hmm.
can.
No, it's really great to see how much, how in depth you can really get and how much you can really push it. And that's the great thing, especially because you're shooting with raw. This was a raw file, I'm assuming, so you have the freedom to do all of that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's feeling good. So I'm curious to see if I choose a color here,
Yes.
it actually gives it such a different feeling. But I don't want to push it too far. Now it's getting a
Mm-hmm.
little bit unrealistic. I want it to stay cohesive. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll leave it about there. That's feeling good. Maybe bring some of the black tones in, back in there. And I might, just for consistency, to do the same exact thing on the other side.
Mm.
And so when you go ahead and you click on the mask tool, because I already created a mask, it's going to ask me to create another mask with this plus sign here. And you can scroll down and decide what kind of mask you want to use. So I'm going to use, once again, the linear gradient.
Beautiful.
I'm going to highlight this left diagonal side of the image and try to create a similar energy here. I feel like it was already pretty consistent, but just want to make sure that every single aspect feels like it's been touched, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it also helps to direct your eyes more to the
Exactly.
subject in the photo. So that's really great.
Right. And That's feeling good because I'm also being mindful of my light source. It's like to the up and left of her. And so to create more brightness and highlight within that area kind of makes sense.
Exactly. That's a great point, because you want to make sure that you are not fighting against what naturally was occurring when you were shooting. You want to make sure that if the sun is coming in one direction, that's the area that you want to, you know, if you're going to brighten, that's the area to brighten. So I really like that tip there.
Exactly. So that's feeling good there. Let's take a look so far
Oh
where
my
we're at.
gosh.
Just an absolute shift.
OMG. This is absolutely stunning. It's so like majestic, so mysterious. It's like it's giving me all the feels.
It's giving fantasy for sure.
I love it.
Just for another reference. Amazing. So that's feeling pretty good. And then whenever I finish an image, I like to kind of like sit with it and come back to it and make any final adjustments after I've revisited it. So maybe near the end of this session, we will see if our opinion changes on if we want to add anything or take anything away. I also always recommend just really clicking into your image and just looking at it bit by bit to see if you missed anything or if you need to do any like spot correcting or anything like that. But she was pretty much in like she was in focus, the lighting was good. I like that so far. So we can move on and play with some other options here.
Beautiful.
How are we feeling, chat? Did that register?
Yes. How are y'all feeling about it? Ray said the difference is like night and day. And I agree. Like when you show that, sometimes you don't even realize as you're editing where you started. And then when you see that before and after, it's like, wow, and crazy how it just, you know, tweaking a few different things and just playing around with sliders, how much you can really change the overall image, the vibe of the image, the feel that the audience is going to get from the image. So that was crazy. So I hope you all like it. If you have any questions, drop it in the chat as we continue to move forward.
Exactly. So here is another image from that same day. I really love this shot, and I'm so glad we woke up early to get this lighting. It was crazy. And so I edited this photo this was shot in 2019, 2020.
Oh, wow.
2020. So my favorite edit of this, I'm gonna show you how I brought it to life. I don't think I have it. I meant to drop it in here, but we're just gonna recreate it. And I'm really excited because I like to push this image really far. And I think that people struggle to get an image like to transform it sometimes. So I'm going to show you how we can really transform this image into something completely stylized. And yeah, you'll see.
Oh, excited.
So this one to me, bear with me. We're going to really reduce the exposure. And then we're going to bring up the shadows. And we are also going to bring up the highlights and the white tones here and the black tones, and going to continue to reduce the exposure. We're going to add some tint. And again, I'm going to scroll down to our luminance, hue, and saturation module. And this time I'm going to go into the hues and play with them here. And I really enjoy like bringing an essence of surrealism and fantasy into my images.
Yeah.
So let's see how far we can take it there and just see how we want to feel. To me, this is giving like she's in the desert. She's, you know, just really like embracing the sun. And I want this to feel so, so warm without making it feel like too much.
Yeah, of course.
So I think we're just going to go back up to the original temperature and toggle it this way. I kind of love that, but we're going to continue to explore. And we're going to see again, this image is going to transform probably a few different times. throughout this process.
And then there's another question here for you.
Mhm.
Do you work on a virtual copy of the original or the original?
That's a great question. Well, since I have this capability down here to kind of have the history saved, it's non-destructive Lightroom. So I just work on top of the original, but when I'm importing, I do make sure, I'm pretty sure it's just saved as like I'll always have the original raw image, and it won't, like when I export it, I make sure I save it as a copy so that it's not, you know, changing the original data.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good tip because in case, especially like you mentioned, in case you come back, sometimes I personally like to revisit work years later. So it's always nice to have the original versions of your work. And then whenever you're making these edits, save it somewhere completely different and make sure that you're not saving over the original file.
Exactly. And so the way that you can do that, if you're not aware, I think if you guys see this file area, and let me know if you can see that, you would just go to export, and then you could create a different folder for yourself. So you can actually find the folder, and I would make sure it's there, right? So if I am saving it there, I'm going to put this into a subfolder. Say Adobe Live, 23, and then maybe I would do done. You want to make sure that it's down here. And once I export that, it would actually end up as a copy versus saving on top of the original file.
Perfect.
So that is some, you know, just housekeeping stuff you want to be aware of, because you don't want to edit on top of a photo that, like we said, you know, that you might want to revisit, or maybe you'll make like a photo book later down the line. You never know when a client will want to revisit a photo either.
Absolutely.
I like to keep that available to them just in case, because, you know, things happen, they change.
Yeah, you never really know.
Right.
This photo is looking so, I'm still stuck on when you went and reduced the exposure.
Yes.
And that's where you like my mind, girl, continue, because my mind is blown a little bit.
I just really love to bring out all of the different shapes. And I think that like just when the highlights are so subtle, this feels like the Mojave Desert, or like you can't, now I feel like you can't tell if this is the sky behind her or if it's a wall. Like it almost feels like a setting sky if there wasn't her shadow there. So now we are toggling in this color grading module here just to see where the midtones will shift, just to give you an idea of how different this image could be.
And then we have another question. It's from YouTube. How did you show the before and after like you did earlier?
Great question. So right here in this gray bar, right below the image, you can actually see here this different before and after feature. And it gives you a few different ways to actually compare your original image to your current edit. As you can see, very different options, and it's looking completely different so far. So you can go ahead and click that anytime to check your edits. Sorry, someone was knocking on my door. And then you are going to go ahead and click just 2 little clicks over to this expansion tool here that will show you right where you started. So this is the current edit, and then to see the comparison, and right here it gives you some different options as well, this little click down. But I like to just kind of click through it and see all of the different ways I can compare. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Of course. So let's see where we are now. We have been toggling the midtones. And so the midtones, I feel like the best way to describe how I use that tool is just, it's kind of like an overall tonal shift of all of the middle tones versus the shadows if I want. And this is great if you want to do like a duotone edit, something funkier, like maybe this would be a great base for like a graphic design. Or, you know, when you're editing, you have to think of all of the different use cases, right? So, am I submitting this to Vogue? Am I creating a graphic out of this with maybe some like bold text on top? Am I going to, do I want it just more crisp? Is this for her modeling portfolio? If it's for her modeling portfolio, she might want like a more traditional edit. Maybe she wants more cool tones, right? So, there's so many different ways you could push this, and this is just one of the many. I like, as I said, I like to go very kind of editorial, very cinematic, very rich in tone. And, and that's really what I mean when we talk about how do you insert your unique voice and vision into an image. And I try not to overthink it. I mean, outside of all of the features that I'm thinking about, outside of the use cases, outside of how the subject wants to be portrayed, how I want to share this image, and if it even fits within a larger breadth of work. So those are all things I consider. And once I consider those, hands off, I just kind of let my mind take the wheel and, try to be as consciously unconscious as possible, like in my flow state,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm gonna land somewhere in this warm area. And I feel like I want more shadow now. And now it's kind of like giving me like 80s magazine ad. It could even feel like that. And if I wanted to even go down that direction more, I could add some grain. And I could possibly add way more noise reduction as well.
Yeah.
Take the sharpening away. And all of the sudden, I have an 80s ad for a jumpsuit.
Love.
Something like that. So let's take another look at where we started and where we landed.
Wow.
Okay. That's fun.
I really, again, I love how you kind of showed us, depending on maybe who the photo is going to, the use of the image can really kind of determine what kind of style you put into the image, how present your voice is. I just love this because a lot of people would go into the more traditional kind of look. And I'm telling you, I'm still stuck on when you went and reduced that exposure. And I was like, I've not seen anyone start with that type of base. So that is absolutely incredible because, and the chat is agreeing so far that it definitely does give that 80s magazine spread and it has more of a cinematic and artistic feel to it. So kudos, Amina girl.
Thank you. Thank you. Don't gas me.
I'm gonna gas you. I'm gonna gas you.
It's so fun. And especially like the reason I want to emphasize that I reduce the exposure is because once you reduce the exposure, you can really see the shapes that are there in the shadows. And I like to really emphasize that. Like, where are our shapes? Where is the emphasis? And the emphasis to me, like, if your subconscious mind is focusing on something, it's going to focus on what's highlighted, and that just comes forth in the image into the foreground really nicely, and all of the shadows fall into the background. So sometimes I try to think of form not as a subject, but what are the shapes that make up this person's form? What are the shapes that are creating the form that is in the foreground of the image? And how is the eye going to travel on the image, in one of these images, we'll talk about creative cropping as well, just so that you get an idea of what you should be focusing on and that kind of thing.
Beautiful.
So let's do another image in this photo set. I like this because the light, we started at sunrise and the light progressively got more and more harsh. And I think this was about midday. So let's see if you are shooting a subject in midday where the sun is really high in the sky, casting really harsh shadows. I used to be one of those photographers that would not shoot in the daylight like this. I was so afraid of those harsh contrasting shadows. But now I'm someone who likes to lean into it a little bit more. And I will tell you and show you why. Obviously, everyone knows that golden hour into blue hour and sunset and dawn are such beautiful times to shoot photos, especially portraits, because the light is always going to be even.
Yeah.
The light source is going to be directly in front of you or directly behind you, but kind of like at eye's length. It really will cast a light onto you. And, you know, lighting like this, it's kind of unforgiving, but if you know how to use it, you can create some really, really striking images. And so again, here, I really like this photo because there's so much shape going on, and I can tell already what my highlights are going to be. So let's start again with that reducing of the exposure and see where that leaves us. It's like reducing that down until you can almost not see it. And then on the opposite side, I will increase the shadow, increase the black points, increase the white and the highlights, and reduce the contrast. And now I can see more of the details within the shadows. So I'm gonna go on down and again, treat this whole process like a game. I treat it like a video game. I treat it like letting my mind wander and seeing what's there in my subconscious that day. And that will really dictate how the image comes out. For this is something that I would maybe want to submit to like Vogue Italia or something. You know, it feels like it's telling enough of a story that maybe it would get featured. Who knows?
Yeah, this is beautiful.
Really enjoying that. And again, kind of giving it that vintage feeling. Maybe that's just how I'm feeling today.
Yeah.
So let's see. I'm curious how it would feel if it's a little cooler. I don't love that. How about warmer? Also, you know, I am someone who veers more into the warmth, so that will probably always be what I opt into. And then now I'm feeling curious to dive back into these different presets on the left-hand side that Lightroom so kindly includes for us. And I just like to kind of get inspiration from that. Sometimes it lands me somewhere that I really like. Sometimes I'm just like, okay, well, maybe I do want to go in that direction. Maybe I don't. But I just like to scroll through it. Shows you what's possible. And then you can kind of adjust it to be where you want it. So these are actually really incredible tools as well. It's also great because it's like you're partnering with the technology. Like it's like giving you a prompt of like, how about this? How about this? I kind of imagine it like talking to me like, oh, this one?
And you have endless possibilities. I think that's the one thing that's so great. There's no right or wrong way to edit a photo. It's you have so many possibilities. And I think Lightroom does a really great job of giving you a variety of these presets so you can see some of those options of what those possibilities could look like.
Exactly. And so here I am curious, what if I actually decrease the luminance? What happens then? And so this red chair here, I like this color, but I don't love it. But it does match her belt here. So I'm curious if I reduce the luminance on the red, maybe it'll desaturate the chair to be at a better tone that feels right for me. So I went ahead and brought the luminance on the red down. What about this saturation? I didn't go down quite enough for me. So I will go ahead and bring it down a little bit more on the saturation, just to kind of even out the tones in the photo. You know, the red was kind of the star of the show for a second.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Now we're kind of allowing it to blend more in that way. And there's actually a few different ways you could do this, but I just chose to target the saturation and luminance because there's really no other red tones in this image. If there was more red tones in this image and I wanted to maybe just isolate the chair on its own, I could actually use a mask and edit it that way as well. Just fun fact.
And you know what? Now that you mentioned mask, we just got a question
Okay,
from
yeah.
YouTube that says, how do you create a mask in Lightroom? And then two, how do you open presets? So a two-part question there for you.
Okay, we will start with the presets. So on this left-hand side of the module, you will always see these presets here for you. And when you scroll to the top, it just says presets. So if you have these three things here, you have snapshots. I don't utilize that feature, so I don't really have much to say about it. But I do utilize the presets in the history, which allows me to go back into any of the edits I've toggled through and choose that. But when you go here, you want to make sure your navigator is here, your presets are here, and then you also want to make sure that you are in the develop module. So as you can see, I'm logged in my Adobe Creative Cloud, and then there's actually a library feature where you will see all of the photos within your catalog. So I uploaded my Adobe Live 2023 folder here from my hard drive. I have my hard drive plugged in, and then I can see all of my photos, quick collections, and my last import, which is so cool. I also use these to import and export. When I export, I typically actually just go up to the file feature and use export, but you could export down here as well. But all that to say, you want to make sure that you are in the develop area versus the library area, because I know it can get confusing at first, especially when you're starting out. So just remember, library will show you how to see and scroll through all of your images at once, but you want to make sure you are back up here in the develop area. That way you can access your presets and your editing modules on the right-hand side. Now let's talk about masking. So the masking tool here, there's a few different options, and I really love that Adobe has embraced AI technology, because these are all AI features, folks. It's pretty cool. So you can actually select an object, you can select a person, you can change the sky or the background, and it does a pretty good job of masking it out for you. Whereas a couple of years ago, you literally would have had to draw out that person to mask them. So let's give it a try. I'm curious to see how it would select the subject in this image. And as you can see, that was pretty quick. So the red highlighted here selected her. I wonder if I could create, and as you can see, I can slide and I can increase or decrease the exposure, and it only affects her. I can increase the contrast. It only affects her. And same with all these other features. That already looks, I think, more professional, more high end.
Agreed.
Yes. And so let's go ahead and see if we can target the chair. So that didn't quite work the way I wanted it to. Selected her once again. If I were to create a new mask and I would select an object, there we go. I think I can actually click this object so it can detect it. And let's see, I don't think it was able to identify the chair. That's fine. It's kind of blending into the background. But there's a few different ways to do it. Like, there's so many different tools. And so, okay, we tried the subject, we tried the object. My next choice would be the brush, which allows you to kind of paint on your subject. And you want it to be kind of concise. So I'm going to bring the feather down. You can see here where I could paint on here. And I'm just going to go ahead and highlight the areas I would want to change.
Beautiful.
And I'm going to go ahead and decrease the size of my brush. And also, whenever I'm masking like this, I really like to utilize the zoom features so that I can get pretty precise here. So let's see. You can get it pretty close to perfect. And when it's not perfect, I believe you can use the eraser tool to actually fix your mask before you affect it. which is incredible because, unless you are incredible and have mastered this skill over many, many years, I don't think that anyone's going to be able to get a perfect highlight on the first try.
Exactly.
And so to have the ability to go in and perfect it is just, it does wonders for my attention to detail,
No, absolutely. And it's all in the same area, so it makes it easy to toggle back and forth between your brush and the eraser. And so that way you don't feel like you are doing too much clicking or navigating around. It's all right there for you to use.
Yes, exactly. So let's make sure that, and so you can actually add to and reduce. This is another subtraction or addition option here for you. So in order to edit the mask, I can go ahead and continue to brush the chair here. Oop. Make sure the size is the size I want it. But you have so much control. Does that process make sense to the chat?
Yes. Let us know if that makes sense or if there's any questions about the presets we talked about earlier or masking.
Yes.
But it's I feel like it's very easy, quick. And like you said, Lightroom has done a really, really great job of giving you different options and quick ways to make your mask. Like I love to create quick masks of the background, your subject. The great thing that's cool about the subject component too is that you can create the mask of the subject, but there's also an option if you just want to do the subject's head or body or arms, legs, etc. And so you have so much freedom there.
Exactly. So I'm just going to go ahead and edit this mask that we created just to give you an idea. It's not going to be perfect. And if I wanted it to be perfect, I might spend an extra 10, 15 minutes on it. But this is pretty solid coverage. And even if I wanted to make it feel a little bit more rustic, like there are so many different ways you can utilize these features to bring your ideas to life, For now, I'm like, oh, wow, the red actually does look good now that I scroll through the rest of these colors. So let's pick a red that feels in alignment. And yeah, something like that. It's feeling like maybe a little bit more worn down, giving it more ambiance. Yeah, and then I would just click the same mask tool to exit out of that editing module. So there we have it. Let's check out our progress once again. Completely different.
Wow.
It feels so vintage, it's stylized, it tells a story now. You don't know if you're looking at a photo from 2020 or 1930. Well, probably not 1930. And then to go ahead so we're pretty zoomed in right now. You can actually click fill to see the full image once again.
And out of curiosity, so this shoot, was it just something that you and a friend did for fun? Was it for a specific brand? What kind of, when you were editing the photos to deliver to whoever this client was, what were they looking for? What were you hoping for? Take us through that a little bit.
Yeah, great question. So these photos, I actually partnered with this girl named Brandy. She was wonderful. She was a flight attendant and she wanted to make a travel blog. And her and I partnered we had plans to travel to many different places. Because 2020 hit and all of that happened, we were only able to make it to Panama in February of 2020. But yeah, the idea was to create a very warm, freeing aesthetic and kind of aspirational. So fashion, but lifestyle kind of merged together. And yeah, just kind of aspirational travel content. Yeah. Beautiful. That was really fun. It was a pretty open-ended shoot.
Oh, love that.
Yes. So let's go ahead and switch over to something different. Let's talk about studio photography and natural lighting in studio photography. This is something that we literally shot in my apartment with the natural light from the window, very small backdrop. And something that always bothers me is these sides. So I'm just gonna go ahead and, adjust the angle so that I can cut off as much as possible. There's also options to like fill that in, which I might go into in a different photo, but this one I just kind of want to show you how to make this lighting a little bit more even because we can tell there's a lot of different shadow and a lot of different hues going on here. So the first thing I would do naturally is just kind of bump up the shadows so that I can see what's going on.
Awesome. And while you do that, we have another question
Yeah.
that says, what are the artistic aesthetic rules that you do apply frequently in your daily projects or you recommend to apply in a project?
Great question. I think that I don't give myself rules other than make sure that my subject looks beautiful, like
Yeah.
looks like their skin tone is accurate, that they're not making any crazy faces. And I try to make sure that their eyes are in focus. That's really important to me. Typically, I try to make sure that the lighting is flattering, but for the most part, I would say that whatever the essence is there, like stick with that and kind of work around it versus trying to like make it something completely different, which is what you can do. But I think that when an essence is there, like I think about it like the Michelangelo sculpture, right? Like you're staring at a block of marble, but there's something that's inside. And so
Yeah.
how do you like reduce enough to reveal what's inside without ruining the essence of the marble?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Beautiful.
I hope that's like not too poetic or whatever.
No, no. Never, never.
Yeah. How about you, Idara? I would love to hear about your process as well.
Yeah, so I think for me, especially because a lot of my subjects are of maybe darker complexions, and
Mm-hmm.
for me, I started off focusing on that because there was a need for photographers to be able to shoot a variety of different skin tones. And so what you said about making sure that skin tones are accurately shot is a huge component of my work. And I personally love vibrancy. I love to make people as vibrant as I can. That's why I love to incorporate color. I love color theory. If I can incorporate, specific color relationships that make the photo more of like a painting or more impactful or more cinematic and also pleasing for my viewers' eyes. That's what I usually aim towards. And then also just giving myself the freedom to do whatever I feel in the moment. I try not to have, like when you said, like not having too many rules. Like, of course, you want to make sure they're lit properly, skin tones are accurate, that the poses are flattering, and that the subject feels confident. And then from there, whatever the vibe is what the vibe is. So
Exactly.
sometimes I'll go in, I'll be like, I have a plan to, I've done this where I'll be like, I'll have a plan to do this. And then the vibe just might not be that. It might be something else. So give yourself that grace to flow. And I think that also gives you the flexibility as an artist to be prepared for anything that happens. Because when you go in with the specific plan, 9 times out of 10, things aren't going to go as you always plan. So you need to be flexible for different setups. And as long as you have your basic rules, like making sure lighting is good and other things as well, I think it kind of just, I don't know, creates more space for freedom and grace there. So that's how I like to approach my work.
I love that. Yeah, it sounds like we have very similar
Yeah,
processes.
I'm like, Amina, I feel like I'm aligned with you, girl. I feel very aligned with you.
I love that. I love alignment. Like it feels very, it just makes me so happy to talk to other photographers that care about the same things that I
Yeah.
do. And it's pretty magical.
Oh, love it.
Thanks, Adobe, for bringing us together.
Yes, thank you, Adobe. And so this portrait is coming out beautiful. What
It's
have you done so far?
so far, I kind of have done a lot, but like very little, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So far, let's take a look and recap what we did. So, I pretty much just tried my best to even out the lighting to the best of my ability so far, and getting it even sometimes is difficult. I don't think that it always needs to be like stark white, but again, you have to think about the usage of the image, right? And so it looks like here I have some more shadows that I might want to buffer out. And what I did was I used a few different linear masks to mask out all of the different diagonal corners and add some brightness and evenness, especially down here because we started with a kind of funky looking background down here, but now it's a little bit less distracting without having to go in and like spot correct each little dirt mark, honestly, and so now I like where we're at, but I want to scroll down to our lens corrections to see if I can create more evenness with our vignette tool. And so I don't know if you notice sometimes when you're shooting photos, there ends up being a natural vignette.
Yes.
And I always go in and just completely reduce it. So as you can see, we started about here. Bumping it all the way to the right helps it a lot. And even bringing the midpoint down evened it out even more.
Yeah.
So now we have pretty much an even background, but if you want to take it a step further, you can actually, this is a great use case to use the select subject tool. And so if, let's imagine, I'm just going to go ahead and actually delete these just to show you what we can do instead. And hopefully by the end of this tutorial, you'll walk away with a few different ways to create masks and utilize these tools.
Oh, love
so
it.
We can go ahead for this one. I think I can select the background actually. Yes.
And while you do that, I want to make sure I also make the quick announcement. If y'all would like to nominate yourself or someone that you know, like you can see Amina is killing it with this live stream and this tutorial. If there is someone else that you want to learn from to be a guest on Adobe Live and you want to submit them as a recommendation, go ahead and click the guest recommendations button, submit any name, yourself, someone you know, fan, someone that you're a fan of, a family member, whatever it might be, someone that you want to learn from and think might be a great guest for Adobe Live, go ahead and submit your recommendations so that way we can consider them for our next lives.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Do that. I know there's so much talent out there, so
there really is.
So check this out. This is kind of an incredible feature. I tend to shoot a lot of like how do you say, like digitals and test shoots with a bunch of models now that I'm in LA. And I love it, honestly, because I think it's the most raw form of portraiture.
Yeah.
You're really getting the essence of that person and a white background. So all of their features are going to jump out. You're going to notice all of those little things about them that you might have not before. So for this one, literally all I had to do was select the background as a mask and bump up the exposure, and now we have a perfect white background. Like,
so
that is
easy,
insane.
so quick, so simple. Oh, love it. And then there's another question specifically about how do you manage the histogram color matrix? Do you follow any kind of mathematical formula equation or the vision of artistic perception, to handle the histogram?
This is our histogram, is that right?
I believe so. I don't know if they're referring to that or the histogram at the top. So Mohammed, if you can clarify because I personally don't really pay attention to the histogram. I just be disregarding it, but that's me.
Honestly, same. Like I will admit that I, over the years, have kind of just trained my eye to find a space that I like, and I just trust that my artistic eye. But I know that there's a lot more like technical ways of measuring how that light lands. And I definitely, if you feel empowered to explore that, I definitely recommend it. It's just not something that I do personally, but I like to, just check the tones with my eyes. And sometimes I'll export to my phone as well so that I can just check on both screens to see how it translates to different screens. Because sometimes, you know, you might not notice if you have like the night feature on your Mac or something like that. It changes the light. So I like to just double check my images on a few different screens before I'm like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I know that that is a tool. I just haven't honed in on it yet. So if you have any tips or anything like that, let us
Yes.
know.
Yes, any tips for the histogram, because I'm not a histogram girly, so
Yeah.
I can't speak to it either. But I do know that there are, like you said, technical ways to also be able to manage the light, making sure your image is not too overexposed in certain areas. But I do also agree that sometimes you can just train your eye to be able to see and catch those things as well.
Exactly.
Love it. We've gone through a few photos. We've done like, have we done like 4 or
I think
5?
we've done 3.
3? Okay, 3. I
No,
gotta have
we've
it
done
up.
4. Wait.
Okay. I said, did I make that up?
1, 2, yeah, 4. You're right.
Oh, yes. Oh, and then
So,
Steve made,
mhm.
sorry, real quickly. Steve also made a comment about calibrating your screen is also key. So that's another way to make sure that your colors and everything is showing up accurately to calibrate your screen. So thank you, Steve, for that tip.
Thank you, Steve. Yes. So let's get into some other environments here. I'm going to show you how I edited this book cover for my dear friend Iman Benet. This was the final edit. I just wanted to include it to show you how far different it was from the actual original images. So these are where we started. This is where we landed. And we're going to see if we can recreate this edit.
Beautiful.
This was really fun to do because we just had this gray wall and we made it work. She's a shining star.
Yes.
So let's see what we did here. First of all, I feel like we need to crop in, and this is what I was talking about with the creative cropping, because sometimes there's too much negative space and you have to really decide what you want your focal point to be. In this case, I would want it to be her eyes. And so I'm going to just kind of frame her in the middle there and see how that looks. Maybe a bit more even. Maybe I'll bring it down. Also, someone asked about the different rules that I use in day to day. I would say the rule of thirds is my number one tip and trick. You know, I like to make sure. I learned this very early on when I was like a yearbook editor in high school and taking photo workshops here and there. Always put your focal point on one of these little convergences here, these intersections within the rule of thirds, because your eye will always kind of dance around these 4 points. And you can use it to center your subject. You can use it, but I like to use it to center or utilize my focal point on one of these points. And I think that gives you a very dynamic image.
Yeah.
Now she's centered, but her eye is just drawing you in. So that's a really strong place to start. Again, y'all know I love to reduce some exposure, so we're gonna do that. And we're going to lift up the shadows, lift up the highlights. It's a little too much. Somewhere there. And let's go ahead and select the background once again. Let's see if it does a good job. Almost. And so in the case where it doesn't do such a perfect job, that's okay, because we can go ahead and erase or adjust. And I'm going to go ahead and click into this layer, this mask, and I'm going to reduce, and I'm going to use my brush to erase some of this mask that it automated for me here. Now with her hair, it might be a little bit more difficult, but I'm just gonna, for the sake of this, do my best here. It doesn't always have to be perfect, but you know, you can spend a lot of time or a little bit of time on these things, and it will all affect your end result. So let's see if that will be good enough for now. I feel like I should actually add a bit more back in there. And so I went in and I used the add feature. Now I'm going to go back in and subtract again with my brush, just this area here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And so I believe what I did was use this color drop tool to change the background color, which is so cool because sometimes you might shoot on the back of a wall that might not be the color that you want it to be. And with a neutral color like gray, it's picking up these different pigments very well.
Yeah.
So we might end up in a different direction than I originally anticipated now that I'm seeing all of this variation. I'm kind of loving this brown. I think I loved that red over here, matching the flowers. That's pretty cool. But for the sake of continuity, let's see if we can get it to a similar tone that I created with the original cover. So it was like a natural blue.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And complements the flower very well, so that I feel like the flower is popping out
exactly
a lot more with that color choice of the background.
Now we're going to go ahead and increase some of this noise reduction on the luminance just so her skin feels super smooth. And I'm going to show y'all one of my favorite tips and tricks to make an image stand out. Even if your photo, for this photo, she looks like her eyes are pretty in focus in general. But some of the time you know, the irises might be like too dark or whatever. And a photo with enhanced eyes will always draw you in more. So I'm going to show you how I actually enhance eyes in an image to add some additional, what's the word, emphasis. And okay, so my secret's out. The brush tool is the one, okay? So I use this brush tool for my masks pretty much exclusively. I would say the brush tool and the linear mask tool. And I'm just gonna go ahead and draw right on top of her eyes. And I'm going to go down here. We're gonna increase the exposure just a bit. We're going to increase or take away some of the shadow. We're going to bring a little bit of the black tones down. And I'm going to just add a bunch of clarity here. Not too much. That looks like too much now, but right about there feels good. Sometimes I go in with a little bit more sharpness as well. And then I'm going to go up here and add some highlight. That's too much. And again, really, a lot of photography and editing is just about trusting your eye.
Yeah.
If you can trust your eye, you can do anything. But
no, agreed.
Yeah, it's really just about practice. And the more you edit and the more you hone in on your own unique style and your own stylistic preferences, the more natural this process will become for you. So I am just increasing or revealing a little bit more of her eye color there. And once I zoom back out, her eyes just look so much more inviting.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a modern Mona Lisa kind of vibe.
Yeah.
I think for the current values, her eyes are a little bit too bright now. So I can always go back in to my mask to adjust it to make it feel more realistic, which is great. I'm gonna just
have that freedom, which is really nice.
Exactly. So I'm just gonna bring the exposure back down a bit to match the rest of the image. And let's see. Very, very inviting.
Wow.
Very nice. So let's get back into this edit. It's feeling, I think I did add some vignette and the aftermath, which is interesting to me because I typically don't do this, but For this image specifically, it felt like it was calling for some more dimension and depth. And so to create that, I actually let some of that vignette back in there. I think I did use a linear gradient to create some of that shadow as well.
Yeah. Again,
Yeah,
leading your eyes really to her and to her eyes, essentially.
exactly. So when you bring that back in, it's just really creating some nice contrast and space to allow your eye to go straight to her eyes. And it makes it feel more intimate. And so, again, when you're editing these photos, any photo, you want to ask yourself, how do you want the audience to feel when they're peering into this image, when they're actually present with it? And you also, like, the audience matters and the client matters. So for her, she wanted to feel this book was actually called Alive Again, The Gift of Eating Well. It's an ebook, and we collaborated on all of the images of the food, all of her PR photos, the cover, so that it was all one through line. And yeah, the book was really just a revolution in her own process, her own journey. This image is so somber because her story was so somber and was so like rich and intimate and vulnerable. And so we wanted the cover to feel the same way.
Wow.
So I want to encourage you all, when you are working within your photographic process, it starts so much earlier than the actual photo shoot itself. It starts with the inception of the concepts. It starts with, you know, how like the legacy behind it. And I like to, you know, go backwards and like in 20, 30, 50, 100 years, when people see this photo, how do I want them to feel?
Yep.
You know?
Oh, absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, I
I
feel like
could literally just get into these details for hours. I think when I did edit the actual cover, I spent hours on every little detail.
I'm sure.
It paid off. So this is like our 15-minute version of that. And let's take a look so far.
Oh, so stunning.
Almost.
Such a
Yeah.
drastic difference. Still her skin tone is maintained.
So this was the actual cover. Let's see. We were almost there. I think the tones were more neutral here, and the linear gradient was a bit more subtle.
Subtle, yeah.
That's so interesting to recreate old edits. I'm like, how did I do that?
Yeah.
But it's really cool because you can do it. And now that I'm looking at that, I'm like, okay, maybe the hues were a little bit like different, you know? And I can also go back into my presets module and scroll through and see if there's anything that jumps out there. Even that just feels so different. Like that could have been the cover if we wanted it to be. But alas, so many options and capabilities. This is a completely different feeling.
Yes. That's beautiful though.
I love that.
This feels like a painting. It's giving me that Mona Lisa vibe.
I fully agree. Yeah. And then I might go in and adjust some more subtle details, such as like smoothing out her forehead. And I would just do that with this little heel option here and kind of just stamp out some of the subtle things that we can blend in with her skin. And kind of just even it out. And there's nothing wrong with some, you know, some bumps on your forehead, but sometimes in an image you want it to feel a little bit more smooth or cohesive. Sometimes the light source was too strong, you know, so I might just want to make it feel a little bit more like silky.
Yes.
No?
I like the word silky. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, like I'm really treating this like a painting. I'm like, oh,
Yep.
let me blend these tones. Yeah, so fun. And let's see how that looks. It's even just a
Yeah.
subtle difference made a difference, you know?
Yep.
Whoops, don't want to do that. Wow.
This is
Kind of
beautiful.
love it. Another fun thing that you can do is like use that heal tool and the clone stamp to edit those subtle changes you want to make. Like this little clip right here for the actual edit, I actually stamped it out because I thought it was distracting. So
Yep.
you can always there's so much detail you can pay attention to if you really have the time to go in on it. And it's like magic. Like how am I just, it was there and now it's not about to be.
Yeah. And let me see. I think we have another question in the chat. Let me see. What are the industry norms and standards frequently used to adapt for project as configuration parameters? That's Mohammed, if you can explain a little bit more of what you're looking for in that question, unless Amina, if that's sitting and resonating with you in a specific way.
I would like a little bit more clarification if possible.
Agreed. And the other question of like, what are the project setup parameters to adapt? So more clarification would be nice. And then we will make sure to answer that question. Thank you.
Yes.
No, this is, it's giving Mona Lisa.
That's our modern Mona Lisa, folks. Boom.
Wow. And then one thing I truly love is it doesn't take having access to so much. This was just like you said, it was a gray wall. You kind of described, or you guys identified the emotion and feeling you wanted in the photo. And I'm sure that went into the choice of the flower, the color, the pose, etc. But it doesn't take much to even just get the photo. And then when you get into your editing, you can really just transform it. And it just looks like a painting to me. It looks so majestic. It looks so beautiful. The fantasy of it. But again, I just love that you don't need much to start and to be able to just, I don't know, explore and see that your possibilities are just really endless.
They really are. And I want to encourage all of you to explore that. Like, even if you don't have a camera or you don't have X, Y, or Z, like professional lens that you want to use Lightroom to elevate what you have in your pocket. You can literally use Lightroom to even edit your iPhone photos. And I actually have an Adobe Live tutorial for that as well.
Yay!
So make sure you check that out if you want to. But so many people I know, so many incredible photographers I know started on either 35 millimeter disposable cameras or with their iPhone or their Android. Like even I used to take photo walks in my neighborhood before I had a DSLR with my little Android phone. And some of those are my favorite photos.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely
so
beautiful.
Use the tools that are available to you and start there. Don't wait until you have the perfect setup, because the perfect setup doesn't exist.
Exactly.
It's just about training your eye and getting into the habit of creating what you want to see more of in the world.
Oh, absolutely.
So this was really fun. These are a part of the same shoot, really. And I really like this one. I think it's very contemplative and just a very inward kind of feeling. And I really like how the lighting starts, but we're going to see where we want to take it. And so as you can see, I typically start my images with either bumping up the exposure or reducing it. This is one of those images that I actually do want to emphasize the light that's available. And so I'm going to increase the exposure and bring down the highlights to kind of find a place, happy middle, And then I would bring these dark colors down Again, kind of making it feel like a painting. And it's so interesting because I could totally see myself like painting this later on in a very like Fauvism, surrealistic
Yeah.
colors kind of way. And I think a lot about that when I'm creating a composition. Like, would I want to see this as a painting?
Yeah.
If this was blown up huge on a wall, would it speak to me? You know, would it
Mm-hmm.
move me? So that's something to consider for sure.
Absolutely.
And if I go into the cropping tool, you'll see that her eyeball is right dead set in the middle of this frame. If I
Mm-hmm.
want it to be perfect, perfect, I can tweak it a little bit there, but it did a pretty good job at centering
Mm-hmm.
that. So I'm gonna kind of leave it as is. And yeah, just see where we can go there. So it's a very natural feeling image. Let's scroll through some of these different presets we have just to see where we might want to land with this one. It's
Mm-hmm.
feeling like it could be just something that we are, hmm. It's like this is giving more Kinfolk magazine. It's giving like
Yeah.
bright, you know, maybe even some desaturation, something like that.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think that's a great choice.
Yeah. Whoa, that's crazy.
I know.
Detail.
The detail and the sharp. What did you, if you don't mind me asking, what do you
Yeah.
shoot with currently?
Yeah, I shoot with a Canon 5D Mark III with a typically my three lenses are my 50 millimeter at 1.4 aperture. I have a 24 to 70 that is a 2.8 aperture, and then I have a 70 to 200
Mm.
millimeter lens, which is also 2.8 aperture. And yeah, those are my three favorites. I sometimes rent out like a 16 millimeter if I want some crazy wide shots.
Yeah.
That's actually really fun to play with. And I really allow like what the bulk of the shoot will be to kind of dictate what I shoot with.
Mm.
This cover image that we just edited here was shot with my 70 to 200, which is kind of why it's so milky and smooth.
Yeah.
I believe this one, yeah, it actually also tells you in this histogram all of your settings, which is
Yes.
really cool. So
Yeah.
I shot this with my 70 to 200 as well. I also could have shot it with my 50, but
Mm-hmm.
I think I wanted that crisp, milky, soft feel, which, you
Absolutely.
know, you can get with the 50 as well. That's actually my go-to. And some of my favorite photos were shot on my Canon T3i. So
Mm-hmm.
don't knock what you got, you know?
Absolutely.
Sometimes I miss shooting with it. So bringing some cool tones in, it looks like it could be a cover for a scary movie now all of a sudden. You know? And yeah, pretty much love where this is going.
Yes.
I would again maybe go in and just kind of smooth out some of these little moments here. I typically ask my client if they want me
Mm.
to remove any like pimples or birthmarks or anything. I think consent is really important.
Yes.
Most of them opt for a yes, but I think as a photographer, it's a good practice to ask, like,
Agreed.
how much retouching do you want? You know, because sometimes retouching can go really far, and I try to keep
Mm-hmm.
it very natural
Yes, absolutely.
to reveal what is there.
Yeah, you just want to enhance. You never want to change or depending, I guess, what your style is as a photographer. But regardless of what that style is, it is important to get that consent.
Exactly. Always, especially if you're like a street photographer. That's really where I
Mm-hmm.
started the most, was like,
Really?
I loved it. I lived in San Francisco for a long time and I would just walk the streets with some friends and shoot, and it was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, if you're in the street and you want to take a photo of someone, just ask. A lot of
Exactly.
the time they'll say, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sure. So that's looking really nice.
Yes, it's beautiful.
really bright.
What is your favorite type of work to shoot?
My favorite type of work to shoot, I think I really love like highly stylized imagery and like surrealistic
Mm-hmm.
kind of like adventure fantasy portraiture.
Mm.
But honestly, this is going to be so corny. I just love photographing people, like literally
I
anyone, you know, because you can peer into their soul. They're so vulnerable with you. They really
yeah.
like open up the door into their inner world. And a big part of photography for me is like lensing someone's higher self or allowing
Yes.
them to really be in that embodiment through our photo shoot together. And
Yeah.
so I try to encourage people to really tap into that version of themselves so that they can, you know, after the shoot, even continue to embody that.
Oh, beautiful.
Kind of love where this ended up. Just for fun, let's push it more into a stylized direction. Let's
Mm-hmm.
see where we want to go with it. Okay, don't love that. We're gonna go into this color grading area here and just see where we want it to end up.
And do you have I know we talked about this earlier, the color wheels, but do you have any kind of formula that you follow, or is it just kind of wherever your eye naturally falls, or just going around the wheel and seeing what kind of stands out to you the most?
Yeah, I'm pretty intuitive with it. I try not to like, you know, do any colors like this that feel unnatural unless
Mm-hmm.
that's like a specific stylization, you
Mm-hmm.
know, decision. Like maybe if I am pairing this with like a photo of flowers or like
Mm-hmm.
using it for like a graphic or something like
Yeah.
that, I might put it in that more like monotone area.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to keep it pretty natural and it's not it's less of a formula and more of just my eye and where
Yes.
it falls. So you know, editing it can be as intuitive as you want it to be or as technical as you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. The way this edit is going so far is absolutely just beautiful.
I'm loving it. It's feeling like just so contemplative and now I'm like, okay, what if we use the mask to select the subject? Whoa, that is really cool. So did an amazing job of selecting the subject. And even though it did select some of this foreground of the
Mm-hmm.
countertop, I'm curious to see what we do with it if we just leave it like that
Mm-hmm.
for fun. So maybe we are bringing this kind of green oranges tint. We can play with the hue as well. And so this is what I want to stay away from is like making her look like an alien, you know, like unless that's what I'm going for. Like if
Yeah.
you want an alien edit, this is the way to do it. But if you don't want that, like I want to encourage you to stay within this kind of natural
Yeah.
realm. But I do like that it brought this green tone in versus and how it's playing with this blue tone up top,
Yeah, that's really
you know?
beautiful.
So I think that's pretty cool. Maybe I'll go ahead and mask out the other side of the counter as well, just to kind of make it all
Mm.
cohesive and green. And I can just do that very easily here with my brush tool.
Yep.
Now I can go in and add
Match
some
it.
of that green
Yeah.
tint back in there. Yeah, something like that. So that it feels a little bit more uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Kind of like that. So
Lovely.
that's fun. And now it's completely, now we have some like color story to play with. Like what is the green and blue saying to us? And I like how her skin is playing with the blue and the
Mm-hmm.
green. Now I might go in back into the original edit and bring some of the highlights back. Now it's feeling a little bit too red on her forehead. And so I'm going to see if I can remedy that using our luminance module here and just kind of bring some of this luminance into the red.
Awesome. And while you do that, we're actually going to start to prepare to close.
Ah,
And so,
that was quick,
I
guys.
know that went by so quickly. It's like you blink and it's like, wow, like where did the last hour and a
Literally.
half go?
Oh,
If y'all have any questions, especially if you didn't get to anything during the live stream, we have Wade, who's been incredible with dropping Amina's website as well as her Instagram as well. Amina, are your DMs open, email? What's the best kind of contact for any questions?
yes, absolutely. Always feel free to reach out to me. Use me as a resource. I'm happy to answer your DMs, or you can email me, whatever feels best. And we can always, chat about this stuff. It's so
Yes.
fun for me to talk about. I could talk about it for hours. So hit me up for
Oh,
sure.
love it. And let's just quickly see this. I know we didn't fully finish this, but what do we have so far before we begin to close?
Yeah, so far we've got well, it looks so different from our original image. Loving this contrast here.
Beautiful.
It's like,
Awesome.
yeah, it came out pretty nice,
It
I would
really
say.
did. It really did. And we got 5 edits in. So make sure y'all go ahead and reference back to this live in case you missed anything. It will be recorded for you. And want to also encourage y'all to stay tuned for a new episode of Design Fix. Join creative director Alex Lazarus as he creates social assets and templates for Kubu Lab, a Brazilian 3D print jewelry business using Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Express. So thank y'all so much. If you want to go ahead and reference back to this, it is on YouTube, it's on Behance, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.